I also, with there being a kind of rain delay at Monte Carlo, I thought this might be a good time to just do a betting diary video, and I don't have anything planned to say as usual it seems, but yeah, I'm sure there's plenty to cover and just discuss. I think the first thing I want to talk about is just the period for the bet bots generally. It has been really difficult this first quarter. I think overall we're still kind of around minus 80 points of the year, which is nuts when you think about it. If anyone was kind of using the whole portfolio and only having one general betting bank, then obviously of course you're close to kind of losing that, and that's why it's really important, I think, to kind of make sure that your staking levels are safe and proportional across different betting banks for the number of tipsters you have. If you've got 10 tipsters, you should really have 1,000 points allocated across your savings for all those betting banks, otherwise your variance is going to be pretty high. And the difference is, rather than losing 80% of your overall bank, you've only lost 8 to 10% of your bank. Obviously everyone's got different levels of risk, but that's my general opinion, especially when you consider overall the bet bots are sort of up around 450 points all time when you consider all the services, and so 85 points or whatever that we're down by is sort of 20% of that. When you consider that a 20% drawdown of the overall portfolio upswing, that's more normal. So there's lots of ways you can kind of interpret losing runs, and this has been a really difficult period. And I think the tough thing is when things don't seem to make sense, and just from a statistical standpoint it just feels weird how so many services are kind of underperforming based on expectations. But the counter to that is that with betting, like there's no guarantees. There's I think the longer I've been a bettor, the more I've learned to expect the unexpected and not to take anything for granted. I have had periods following tipsters before where I have had 3 to 6 month periods like this, to be honest. Like it does happen. There are never on the bet bots itself in terms of a portfolio. It's been the most volatile period by quite a distance, but generally speaking, if you follow a lot of tipsters, you can just have periods where it all kind of goes wrong, and yeah, this is one of them. But if you've been betting responsibly and covering your bases and sort of playing defensive when you know your bankroll sort of might be taking a bit of a hit, then you know it will turn around, I'm sure. Like, I'd be very surprised if by the end of the year the BetBots portfolio isn't in healthy profit, because generally I think if you look at all the individual services, there's no service where I would say, oh, I definitely don't think they're gonna make profit in the future. It's just one of those freak periods where a lot of the BetBot services are just underperforming right now. So you do just have to hang in there. The general advice that I gave on the group chat is to make sure that the key is that you should never feel too down during a losing run. So if you're betting if you're losing a certain amount and you're betting a certain number of services, and then it's causing your day to be affected or your week to be affected, mood for example, then it means you're betting too much. You need to cut your number of services that you're following, cut your staking. Like, it should never be impacting your material life, because ultimately it's not worth it. Betting needs to be fun. So I do think it is one where if you are in a situation where it is feeling tough, then just kind of, what the great thing about our BetBot services is as well, is that you can just take breaks from services for a couple of months. if it's easier, you can just take a break from some of the services and then just follow a few like Leo bonds, where you are less likely to have that volatility because the ROI is higher and their odds ranges are nice, so it is more consistent. Whereas with new services and even my tennis at the moment, you've got to look at kind of like the overall data from the last year, and if you were to follow mine, you kind of have to think, oh, okay, like it's more likely to have some upswings and downswings, and you kind of got to be prepared for that. That being said, that kind of relates nicely to what I want to talk about next, and as usual, it's I want to say a bit about my own tennis. I think, yeah, like I don't want to repeat myself. I really think this year's been very strange for me, because just from a perspective that I actually feel really good compared to what I was the last couple of years. I think in terms of my overall strategies, they're far closer to what I was doing back in 2018, when I had my best year. I think it's just that combination of ATP generally being difficult right now. It just feels like I'm not getting performances when I bet on the players on the bot. Sometimes it just sometimes happens. You end up betting on a lot of flat performances, or you end up opposing guys that end up playing better than expectation. It feels a bit of that combined with, some, like obviously I've covered the variance in March and February or whatever. But what I would say is, from a personal level, I'm not gonna try and kind of give this spiel about I'm gonna try and make all this profit back and really want this year to end in profit now. I think I've kind of realigned my expectations so that what I really want to do is just cut down on volume a bit and really focus on higher ROI. Similar to how Philippi does his betting, he kind of models his football bets, and then once his bet is determined to have an ROI of 10% plus, then he'll take that bet. I'm looking at it more from that perspective. For the period ahead, I want to kind of build in more margin into my bets and lower the amount of volume, especially when you've got a large portfolio like this. There's no pressure to kind of have to send lots of volume. I realize a lot of you guys are already betting a lot, so I really want to prioritize quality over quantity. It does mean that it's going to be hard to get the turnover to make sort of 60 points back over 7-8 months for sure, but in the long term, if I can kind of get to a point where I'm betting 30-40, even 30-40 good quality bets a month, ROI of 7-8%, maybe making an average of 5-6 points for the next 6-7 months. Like, I think on a general level, that would just be good for consolidation, and just to show that I'm not going away, and that I can get back on track. So yeah, that's where I'm kind of aligning myself with the philosophy at the moment, just really trying to pick solid spots, and hoping for a bit of variance to go with that, because the worst thing you can do is just, I think, in a bad period like this, is you don't want to change your betting behavior too much, but at the same time you don't want to dig a really deep hole and then lose trust completely. I'd rather get to this point where it's like, okay, let's really kind of take a step back, slightly adapt now so that I'm betting safer bets, and then if we can kind of get on a decent roll coming up to the grass court season and confidence among subscribers and stuff is a bit higher again, then it makes it easier to attack. So that's kind of where I'm going with it. I just want to really sort of take a little bit of mental burden off myself as well. The lower volume, the higher ROI selections are going to lead to a higher strike rate, and ultimately it's just going to be safer and a less volatile service if I do it this way. So yeah, it is still, on a general level, it's just incredibly frustrating how Miami went, because basically so many sort of shortlisted ones that I could have bet won. All the ones that I bet have bad luck. It was one of those events where I was just scratching my head completely, because it really was an event where you can attack fast hard course. Like, I do really like that type of betting, whereas the events now at Monte Carlo, Barcelona, you do have to be a lot more disciplined. But yeah, like, even though I'm saying I kind of want to cut down on volume and higher ROI, I've still got my favourite tournaments coming. Madrid grass court season, I have had some very good, like the year before last at the French Open, I had a very good French Open as well. So it's not going to be a hard and fast rule that there's definitely not going to be much volume, but it's one where I want every bet to count. And I know I've probably said this before, but you can just see in terms of like how there's been very little volume in terms of the last 10 days. I am being, pretty cautious at this point. Yeah, I think on a general level as well, I do expect this period ahead, the summer period, spring, summer, it's usually a better time for betting, I feel. Maybe not for football as such, but for tennis, golf, horses, generally, I find it hard to believe that we won't have a decent summer, just from the perspective that, from my previous experiences in previous years, it does tend to be the best time of year to make profit is kind of from May to September on a general level. For some reason, rain and wind is in the UK, where a lot of our betting is based in Europe, right? It does just kind of add a bit more unpredictability, and I do think there is something to be said for it being slightly easier to bet when the conditions are like they are in the summer. Okay, the next thing I just want to discuss is kind of the group chat and maybe my own approach to how I cover things in the group chat. And I really do want to make the point that even if sometimes I might seem defensive, and just because I'm very forthright and direct with how I make points, I do really appreciate all the feedback, and when you have a point to make, like, feel free to make it, even if it might seem like I'm strong on the rebuttal. A lot of the time it's because I'm needing to clarify my own positions and my own sort of headspace about a certain topic, and it's good to kind of air it all out and say what you want to say about a certain matter. And then, sometimes I might kind of back down a bit on what I thought about before and say, that's a good point, and then we can make an adjustment. Or on another occasion, it might be that, like, I've heard your point and I've made my point, and, I'm happy to kind of stick with mine, and I hope that you guys get a better perspective of where I'm coming from a certain thing. And that's sort of how I feel about the whole odds recording debate. And like, I really do get what people are saying, that if you want to be recording the odds at fair prices that are achievable for subscribers, but equally I don't want to impose my will and too much on any individual tipster. Like, if they want to do a setup in a certain way, like, I don't want to stop them to the point where they're like, okay, I'm fed up, I don't want to be on the bot if I can't have any control over what I'm doing, right? So that's why I kind of allow the tipsters to have their own opinions. They give you we try and give you as much information as possible about all our BetBot services, how they work, like what to expect if you follow a BetBot service. And then it's kind of up to you whether you want to follow that, given the information that you're given. Like with EV is King, for example, you might find that, I don't like the way he records odds, but equally I've got a really big bankroll and his ROI is massive, and it's a pretty safe option for making profit based on the past stats. So I'm willing to kind of suck up my perceived, like, my own sense of what I would do if it was my own service, and bet on them, because you know ultimately I'm going to make decent profit and it's going to be valuable to me. Equally, it might be one of those where you're like, okay, well, I'm not betting that much. I might be betting £30 a point, so it's more important for me to get close to the odds every time. And if I'm not 100% sure on how the odds are going to be recorded, I'll give it a miss. So, you know, I think it is definitely sort of important to be really clear with the communication from me to all of you guys about how the setup's going to work, but then ultimately there's a limit to what I can do, like, because ultimately I want all the tipsters to feel like they're having their own services. So I don't want to have kind of policies where every betbot has to be stringently recording odds in the same way, or whatever. I prefer there being more flexibility than that. And yeah, it is just kind of what it is. But yeah, I hope you will kind of just appreciate the fact that I'm trying to be as honest and transparent as I can be about all these kind of different topics. And yeah, as I said, I just really do appreciate the feedback. So when we have one of these kind of debates, that is, you know, I think, you know, there's a lot of passionate people, and a lot of, and especially with betting, emotions often ride high. So when you do kind of have these kind of debates, you end up sort of getting some of the best feedback. Like I do completely agree with what Tomo's saying. Now, we probably haven't highlighted the different group results enough, for example, and that's something that, you know, I'm really going to look forward to maybe at the end of each month summarising how each group has performed in a certain betbot, because that makes it a lot fairer and easier for guys that are using the Betfair exchange for most of their betting to know, okay, this is exactly how much profit I could make, or like historically has been made, and right now that's not clear. So that's why I appreciate all these chats, even though they're sometimes sort of, you know, difficult in the moment. They're great in the long term, because it just gives you a better picture of what everyone's thinking, and to get some kind of perceptions that you haven't considered yet. And that's why, you know, if a tipster as well reaches out for feedback, like they'll be really grateful if you actually tell them what you want. Because I have noticed a lot of the tipsters on our platform, like they do reach out and they do say, like, give me a message to say what I want, and that does make everything easier as well if you react in that moment and be like, okay, I'm going to tell the tipster, like, this is the feedback I want to give, and, you know, then they can work with that. Whereas, you know, we can't, as a tipster, you can't read your members' minds, so you do have to kind of clarify if you want something done, and it's better to do that in the moment, which is why I do appreciate, you know, on the group chats and stuff when we do have these debates, because that's how, you know, we make progress. So yeah, as usual, my rant a bit about everything, and I didn't know where it was going. But yeah, like hopefully we do have, I feel like I've been saying it all year, so I do realise it kind of gets a bit deja vu at times saying the same things, but yeah, it does just take like that one period where 4 or 5 tipsters catch fire, get 20 points each in a month, and suddenly, you know, the year would be back in profit. So it's really one where you're following a big portfolio like this, there is going to be volatility, but equally it can work both ways. And so far this year it's kind of been against us, but it can easily turn around, which is why overall we're up 450 points for the whole portfolio, so to speak. So yeah, but fingers crossed it happens soon, because yeah, it is just it can be wearing. I completely get that. It can wear you down a bit where it's consistent, and you know, you've got your money to pay the bills and whatever. There's only a limited amount that you can put across to betting, and then if you have to cut stakes, it's harder to make that money back. So yeah, like, I completely appreciate that, you know, sometimes you are going to have to kind of have a little, get it out of your system, so to speak, have a rant, but ultimately, you know, we're all in this together. We're all kind of all the tipsters, like, you know, they're great people. You can just tell by how they interact in the group chats. Like Ben's energy, for example, is like unparalleled. I love hearing all the insights from him. And just it is important, if you're a follower, just to consider the sort of tipster element as well, and just be like, oh, okay, if I say this, will it help the tipster, and so forth. Like, it's just a consideration I think should be made. But yeah, cheers guys, and hope some of you appreciated those thoughts.